Now that we have got a brief idea about the non-alignment movement, we also saw the background behind it. Now comes the question, what exactly is non-alignment? Because this is a very conflicted word. Often there are many conflicting ideas about what non-alignment could be. So in this particular lesson, let's understand and dive deeper into the meaning of non-alignment. Now, the word non-alignment was first coined by V.K. Menon, who was the former Defense Minister of India. So, he first coined this term in his speech at the United Nations in 1953. We can see a picture of V.K. Menon over here. Now, can you answer this question? Who first coined the word non-alignment? Was it Jawaharlal Nehru, V.K. Menon, Mahatma Gandhi, or Motilal Nehru? The correct answer is V.K. Menon. However, the term non-alignment was popularized by the then Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru in his speech at Colombo in the year 1954. We can see a picture of Jawaharlal Nehru alongside the Defense Minister V.K. Menon. Now, while V.K. Menon coined the term non-alignment, it was Jawaharlal Nehru who popularized it. Now, what is non-alignment? Do you remember the teachings of Gautama Buddha? If you remember, then you also would be recalling something known as the middle path. When in life we face a choice between two extremities, it is the morally correct choice to choose a middle path, not choosing either extremities and walking right through them. Now, India in the Cold War period faced such a situation where it had to make a choice between either choosing the side of USA or USSR. Now, these were two extremities to India's policy, but they were also too strong to ignore. In such a situation, inaction is often perceived as an action, as not doing something can be a statement of its own. Therefore, the Indian leaders knew that they had to choose a path. And that is when the Indian leaders realized that already in India's cultural history, we have the concept of a middle path, and that is Gautama Buddha's middle way. Now, this non-alignment is a political middle way of sorts and therefore is reminiscent of the teachings of Gautama Buddha. Now, it makes sense thus that the concept of non-alignment came from India itself, the home of Gautama Buddha's teachings. Generally, it is perceived that non-alignment is a neutral ideology which also follows isolationist tendencies. It is an ideology that is against international cooperation, and it also has or shows disregard for international issues. However, these are not the characteristics of non-alignment. In reality, these are some misconceptions regarding what non-alignment is. As already mentioned, the concept of non-alignment is very contentious. There are many conflicting ideas. In reality, non-alignment is absolutely not neutral, as neutrality is a strict position of any nation which declares non-interference in any particular international matter, whereas non-alignment is not like that. A nation which is following non-alignment can very well be part of alliances, as this is not a permanent status like neutrality. Over here, a nation can judge any international matter on its merits and demerits, and then can make a decision on its own based on its own national interests and not based on the influence of any major power. Therefore, we understand that non-alignment is clearly not about neutrality. Non-alignment is also not isolationist, as isolationism is a foreign policy where a nation stays away from all possible forms of alliances. Whereas in case of non-alignment, it is the nation's choice whether it wishes to form alliances or even intervene into other nations' affairs if it feels the need so, or if it is in greater good. Therefore, non-alignment is a choice, and in non-alignment, generally a nation stays away from military alliances, not all forms of alliances. Now, coming to the notion that non-alignment is against international cooperation and also has a disregard for international issues. As we can clearly understand after discussing much about the non-alignment movement, that these particular notions are absolutely wrong. This is because non-alignment aims to create a movement where many nations come together to follow the policy of non-alignment. And also this movement which non-alignment aims to create and actually did create as a non-alignment movement acted as a platform for global efforts against colonialism, racial hatred, economic exploitation of third world countries, and even the cultural right preservations of ethnic minorities. Therefore, clearly non-alignment does not show a disregard for international issues. Instead, it acts as a platform which brings together many nations to discuss and to solve such issues. In fact, the non-alignment policy and the movement which came out of it inspired the foreign policy of multiple Afro-Asian countries that gained independence in the subsequent years so that they can develop themselves in the international sphere. Do you think a policy which would have been against international cooperation would have done something like that? Now, this over here is a representation of how, in many ways, non alignment policy inspired the eventual foreign policy of multiple Afro Asian countries that then managed to get independence in the subsequent years by fighting against colonialism. Last but not the least, the non-alignment movement even helped the United Nations, which is not joining either the USA bloc or the USSR bloc, and thus helped the world from not being divided into two halves. So the non-alignment movement in many ways cut down the spheres of influence and also helped the world from not being divided into two parts. Now that we did some myth busting about non-alignment, let us look at the actual characteristics of non-alignment. Non-alignment is a policy which involves the independence of judgment of the nations following it regarding the stance they take. So whenever an issue comes before a country that's following non-alignment, they will judge that issue on its merits and demerits and then make a decision based on their own national interests. Now, non-alignment also involves freedom from obligations and various kinds of commitments, especially the ones made to major powers, which in turn will help the nations following non-alignment to effectively focus on their own national development. Now, non-alignment also involves staying out of military alliances, especially the ones which are multilateral and also propagated warlike situations. Now, non-alignment is not against international cooperation and instead centers around it and believes that a nation that follows non-alignment should act neutrally and also mediate between two conflicting powers to make sure that cooperation and peace is maintained. Finally, and most importantly, non-alignment believes in shaping a movement to act as a platform in which international issues can be brought forward and then subsequently solved. Now let us see what Jawaharlal Nehru, the person who popularized the concept of non-alignment and was also a founding father of the non-alignment movement, has to say about non-alignment. He says that non-alignment does not mean passivity of mind or action. It does not mean submission to what we consider evil. It is a positive and dynamic approach to such problems that confront us. So he says that non-alignment is not inaction. It does not mean staying away from international issues. It instead is a very dynamic approach and also a positive one to solve the problems which are considered as social and political evils. Now, what does a country have to do to be non-aligned? Let us see the various criteria a country has to fulfill to be able to follow the policy of non-alignment. Now, such a country has to adopt an independent policy, a policy that is not influenced by any external power and also not be aligned to any of the power blocks, namely the power bloc of USSR and the power bloc of USA. So this country needs to be centered around its own national policy, one that is not influenced by external powers and also not be aligned to either of the power blocks of the Cold War period. Such a country also has to consistently support the movement for national independence, as the non-alignment movement primarily consisted of nations who have fought hard for their independence and also of various territories that were still fighting for their own government. So therefore, national independence was a very important issue in case of non-alignment, and any nation which wants to follow this policy also had to support the movements for national independence. Such a country could also not be a member of any multilateral military alliance. Now, a multilateral military alliance is a military alliance where many nations come together and then they declare that if any of the members get attacked, then all of the members will come together to defend that particular member. Therefore, a multilateral military alliance promotes the concept of going to war, and that is something which non-alignment was against, especially of the wars between the two power blocs. Now, the multilateral military alliances of the time of the Cold War included alliances such as NATO, which was a military alliance led by the US bloc. It also included SEATO and also the Warsaw Pact, which was a military alliance led by the Soviet bloc. So we can understand that these military alliances were primarily built to increase the sphere of influence for these power blocs. And a country which wishes to follow non-alignment has to also be non-aligned from these multilateral military alliances. Now, a country that wishes to be non-aligned should also be able to judge any international issue on its merit, and then also be able to uphold the rights of all people for freedom and justice. Such a nation should also be able to actively participate in international politics instead of remaining aloof from it. So any nation which wishes to follow non-alignment just as an excuse to be aloof from international politics and affairs should not do so, because non-alignment is not against international cooperation. Instead, it is centered around it and also wishes to act as a platform where international issues are discussed and then subsequently solved. So in this lesson, we were able to understand the true meaning of the word non-alignment. We also were able to bust some myths about what non-alignment is not, and we also saw the characteristics of what it truly is. Then we also saw the various criteria a nation has to follow in order to be able to follow the policy of non-alignment. Now in the subsequent lessons, we would be seeing the various causes behind the rise of the non-alignment movement in detail. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon. You can also register for free at DeltaStep.com or download the DeltaStep app to learn one-to-one with our amazing teachers, or to get access to all our 5,000 plus amazing videos as per your school syllabus. Master each topic with our adaptive practice technology. Get million plus questions with step-by-step solutions and unlimited mock tests. Get all your doubts resolved instantly. Learn via games and win amazing prizes like PlayStations and iPads. So at DeltaStep, learning is not just fun and easy, it is rewarding too. So register for free now.